Senate will come to order. Mr. Carpenter, call the roll.
Senators Aguilar, Baumgardner, Cook, Corum, Court, Crowder, Donovan, Finberg, Fields, Garcia, Gardner,
Excused.
Guzman, Hill, Holbert,
Excused.
John, Jones, Kagan,
Excused.
Kafalis, Kerr, Lambert, Lundberg, Marble, Martinez Jimenez, Merrifield, Moreno, Neville, Priola, Scott, Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Tate, Todd, Williams, Zinzinger,
Let's go.
Mr. President.
Here. 32 present, 0 absent, 3 excused. We have a quorum. Colleagues and guests, at this time, if you could direct your attention up into the gallery, we have some special guests this morning. We have the Colorado Mesa University Rowdy Brass Band here in the gallery, and they will be playing for us the national anthem. Take it away. Thank you again to the Colorado Mesa University Rowdy Brass Band. Well done. Thank you for being here today. Let's give them another hand, folks. You are right. They were. What was, oh, Hey Jude. That's what they're going to play. I think you have another one for us, don't you? Go ahead, do it. Excellent. Thank you for being here. That was excellent. Senator Kagan, would you come lead us in the pledge? He's not on the roll. Please add Senator Kagan to the roll so that he can lead us in the pledge.
Colleagues, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
Republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please add the majority leader to the roll. Approval of the journal, Senator Corum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the journal for February 6th be dispensed with and approved as the secretary.
I've heard the motion. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion is adopted. And that's where we have them play the jury. Should we have them do it again? Committee reports.
February 6, 2018, Committee on Transportation. After consideration of mayor's committee articles the following. Senate Bill 102 be amended as follows. As submitted, referred to committee of the whole. The favorable recommendation. February 6, 2018, Committee on Finance. After consideration of the mayor's committee articles the following. Senate Bill 127 be amended as follows. As submitted, be referred to committee of the whole. The favorable recommendation be placed on the consent calendar. February 6, 2018, Committee on Finance. After consideration of the mayor's committee articles the following. Senate Bill 83 be referred favorably to Committee on Appropriations. February 6, 2018, Committee on Finance. After consideration of the mayor's committee articles the following. Senate Bill 47 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. February 6, 2018, Committee on Finance. After consideration of the mayor's committee articles the following. House Bill 1031 be referred to Committee of the whole. The favorable recommendation be placed on the consent calendar. February 6, 2018, Committee on Finance. After consideration of the mayor's committee articles the following. House Bill 1022 be referred to Committee of the whole. The favorable recommendation be placed on the consent calendar.
Senate Services.
Correctly engrossed, Senate Bill 73 and 93, Senate Joint Memorial 4. Correctly re-engrossed, Senate Bill 101.
Message from the reviser.
We herewith transmit without comment House Bill 1032, 1039, 1096, 1100, and 1101 without comment as amended, House Bill 1005 and 1095.
Third reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Carpenter, please read all of the titles to the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar.
Senate Bill 93 by Senator Moreno and Representative Arndt concerning the repeal of obsolete provisions in the Colorado Medical Assistance Program relating to the inactive home and community-based services waiver for persons living with AIDS.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 93, the one bill listed on the third reading of bills consent calendar.
Is there any discussion on any of the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of all the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar. Are there any no votes on any of the bills? With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 93 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Third reading of bills, final passage. Senator Jones is a co-sponsor on Senate Bill 93. Third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of the Senate Bill 73.
Senate Bill 73 by Senator Smallwood and Representatives Ransom and Hare concerning reporting to the Department of Revenue when ownership of a motor vehicle has been transferred.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 73 on third reading, final passage.
Is there any discussion? Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask for the privilege of presenting a third reading amendment.
Request has been made to offer a third reading amendment. Please explain the need for this amendment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sure most members recall that I did have some questions about the bill, which I think is a pretty good bill, actually. But I'm a little concerned that it's not as explicit as it should be, that this option for citizens selling their cars is a voluntary option and isn't necessary for the actual transfer to occur. And therefore, I have some language in an amendment that makes it explicit that it is a voluntary program. Now, I'm asking for this on a third reading, and I recognize we are the first House for this bill, but I think the Senate ought to send them a complete package on the legislation rather than guess as to whether or not the House would make this correction. So I am therefore asking for permission to present this to the Senate, Mr. President.
Question before the body is permission to offer a third reading amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and permission is granted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read Amendment L005?
Amendment L005 to Senate Bill 73 by Senator Lundberg, amending gross bill
Senator
page.
Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move L005 and ask for its favorable adoption.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President, and allow me to add a little more definition to what the amendment does. It simply adds the word voluntary before program at the beginning of the bill, where it mentions the program, and then it adds a final statement that says this subsection does not require the owner who transfers a motor vehicle to another person to report the sale to the department in accordance with this subsection. It's just the language to be explicit. This is a voluntary part of vehicle transfer, and I'm sorry, but my experience around the world of legislation and how it gets implemented is sometimes what's considered to be voluntary by some ends up a requirement for all of us, and I don't believe that we want to put that on the people of Colorado, and I believe this is commensurate with the spirit of the bill, just makes it a little more clear.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the good senator bringing this. I don't think this in any way violates the spirit of what we were trying to accomplish, the things we discussed in committee, so I'd view this as a friendly amendment. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L005? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L005. Are there any no votes? Senator Moreno. Senator Zenzinger, Senator Jones. With 31 ayes, 3 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Amendment L005 is adopted. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 73? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 73 on third reading. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 73 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Cort, Senator Todd, Senator Zenzinger, Senator Lundberg, Majority Leader Holbert, Senator Cook, Senator Neville, Senator Martinez-Humenick, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Marble, Senator Aguilar, Senator Merrifield, Senator John, Senator Fields, Senator Jones, Senator Priola, Senator Scott, Senator Kafalis, Senator Kagan, Senator Kerr, please add the president. General order, second reading of bills. Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of General Order, second reading of bills calendar.
Motion before the body is for the Senate to resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for consideration of the General Order, second reading of bills calendar. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of the General Order, second reading of bills calendar. Senator Cook will take the chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee will come to order. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 2?
Senate Bill 2 by Senators Corman Sonnenberg and Representatives Becker, Kay, and Duran concerning the financing of broadband deployment.
Any discussion on Senate Bill 2? Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We move Senate Bill 2 and the Business Committee report.
To the Business Committee report.
Jerry,
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move 18, L018, and L033, which amends L018.
Senator Sonnenberg, we are on the committee report?
Both of those are to the committee report, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
My apologies.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the adoption of the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the Business, Labor, Technology Committee report? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of the Business Senate or the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. Okay, and we do have an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L017.
Amendment L017 to Senate Bill 2 by Senator Guzman, amend printed bill, page 4, line 19, strike 20, and substitute.
Senator Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this is a very important bill. All of us on both sides of the aisle have been supported for years, supporting the opportunity for rural broadband to take its place. It's been one of my biggest priorities and the biggest priority of so many of us in this chamber. I'm wanting to bring this amendment, which is designed to ensure that adequate resources are available to start building more of these networks in underserved areas throughout the state. If we are dedicated to building these networks, I want to be sure, and all of us want to ensure that the resources are there. So therefore, I move Senate Bill, L017.
Any further discussion, senators, on Amendment L0? Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this amendment we indeed ran in committee, and it failed by one vote. This becomes the question, do we want to actually put resources out there to deal with the internet now and speed that process up? My argument is indeed we do. If we do the 60% up front the first year and then 10% rather than 20, 40, 60, 80, it makes sense. The whole purpose of the high cost fund was to deal with telephones and those type of expansion. We don't need that money there anymore, quite frankly. Let's put it in the internet. Let's put it into broadband where we actually need it. I am fine with this amendment and support the amendment, but I understand the philosophical issues you may have if you don't want to spend the money on the internet up front.
Senator Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would consider this a friendly amendment. Members, in the high cost fund since 2007, we've put $544 million into that account. And so what we're doing here, I think, is saying, you know, we should have been a long ways down the road on this. I think the voice is well protected, and it's time to step up and get internet broadband service into all of Colorado, not just cherry pick the metropolitan areas.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And colleagues, we had a tremendous amount of discussion on this, and as you can imagine, an issue like this within the business Labor and Technology Committee, there were a number of amendments that were prescribed. And I think that many people there was a lot of give and take on this bill. This was an amendment which did not pass in Business, Labor, and Technology. The concern is when you have a program that is extremely important to the communities that are going to be affected, the ones that are looking for broadband, but also the ones that are looking for telephone service, 911, and that type of thing, and you're ramping one program up as you're ramping one program down. Let me ask you, how does it make sense to front load a program with 60 or, I'm sorry, is it 70% now? Oh, it's up to 70%. I think it was 60% on the first amendment we saw. So now we're actually rolling the dice a little bit more and we're going for 70%, taking that money up front, rolling out a program which basically, if you were a person that were responsible for this program, would you say, let's roll out 70% of the money in the first year when we haven't had an idea? We had a lot of conversation in that committee about how this works and how this should be applied. And then we strip all that money out in the first year, and we still have the focus, the provider of last resort, the person that is actually giving in this situation, to allow this program to start, and we say, well, we're taking all the money from there, who cares, because we have a new program, and woohoo, we're going to have broadband for everybody. Now, how many times have you seen a government program that takes and front loads 70% of spending and actually gives you a good result in the first year? How many of you in this body would think that there aren't adjustments that will need to be made with the protocol of how this program is applied? I urge a no vote.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a concern on this amendment. And my concern is very simple. If you take a large percentage of somebody's business model and tweak it to where that money has to be flow out quicker, will that potentially have an impact on some of my constituents? It's reported about 28,000 could potentially have a rate increase, which quite frankly, they just can't afford. I think the 5-year plan was good. I think we all supported that. But I'm very concerned about this kind of rollout that quickly with that kind of funding.
Any further discussion on Senator Sonnenberg? And before you start, in case I forgot, the court rule is relaxed. The important stuff. Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. You know, it may seem like a quick rollout, but we voted to have this happen 2 years ago, and nothing has happened. And we read every day about how the people in our rural communities are waiting and needing broadband. And even with passing this today, it's going to take a long time to get them what they need. So I feel like some games are being played around releasing and letting this money actually get to the community. And I would encourage your support of this amendment.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me try and explain a little bit. We had talked about a huge chunk of somebody else's money, which we're talking about a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company that receives roughly over 90% of the high-cost mechanism now to do things that aren't getting done. This doesn't take that money away from them. What this does is says you have to compete with everybody else now. We're not just going to write you a check. If you choose not to compete, yeah, then that money doesn't come to you. But you can still compete, and if you already have an infrastructure out there, you should be able to do it for less. So it gives an advantage to this multinational company. And if we're going to take 60% the first year instead of 20, 60% of 38,000 instead of 20% of 38,000, we have a chance to make a difference. Now, if you want to talk about whether or not the government program works or doesn't work, that's not this. This is amendment talks about how much money do we actually want to put out and get started at solving this rural broadband issue. That's why I support this amendment to take it from instead 20% to 60% that first year. That makes sense to me. Allow the multinational company to compete. It doesn't mean they'd lose their money. They just compete with everybody else. And if you're about competition, then let's do this.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too rise in support of this amendment. But let's go back in time just a little bit and talk about this. This was a commitment we made to rural Colorado years ago, right? Before most of us had the honor of serving as senators in this chamber, this building came together and did extensive work to agree upon a system of taking the high-cost support mechanism funds and transferring over them to the broadband deployment fund. And then those dollars would be available for people to apply for to roll out rural broadband in unserved areas. Because of ongoing litigation, we have not stuck to that promise. And that has been an issue that I've been working on since I came into this building, of how do we start moving those dollars? How do we stick to our word that we gave, that we were going to take the high-cost support mechanism funds that are for telephone support and move them over to deploy broadband? I support this amendment because it starts to make up for the lost ground that we've had because we failed to act and we failed to take action over the past handful of years. So I ask for your support on 002 because it starts to make up the ground, because we lost many years when we originally enacted this legislation in this building. Thank you.
Senator Corm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I rise in support of this amendment. Members, in 2014, when we passed the broadband legislation, at that time we said we were going to take 20% per year from the high-cost fund and move to broadband. Members, that was litigated, and we didn't get those funds. We're just starting to get funds. Frankly, had that bill, as we passed in 2014, been in effect, we probably wouldn't be here today, because we would already have those funds. And to talk about over 90%, 92% to be exact, of $504 million by a multinational company, they've got their funds. And frankly, that's not their funds. Those are the funds that collected off of me and the citizens of Colorado that pay that 2.6% surcharge on their cell phone and their landline. So I think this is a good amendment. It's just getting us to where we should be now already. Thank you.
Any further discussion on L17? Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, colleagues, we talk about trust. We talk about what we voted on. That was a committee vote. It was defeated in committee. I guess my question always to the sponsors is, if this was such a great idea and this was a focus, why wasn't it part of the original bill?
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's a great question. Quite honestly, when we first designed the bill and worked on the bill, we didn't know what that right number was. And so we threw out 20, 40, 60, 80. There were a number of people then that came to us after that, including the governor's office, including people that actually want to move and get to internet, that said, you actually ought to spend more of that money up front, because just sitting there and allowing someone to not put it to use doesn't make sense. That's how it came. I don't have a better answer than that. We just decided to split it over 5 years. This makes more sense after the discussions that we had. That's why I support the amendment.
Any further discussion on L17? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of Amendment L17. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and L17 is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Ms. Carpenter, please read L019.
Amendment L019, Senate Bill 2 by Senators Quorum and Sonnenberg, amend the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report dated January 31st, 2018, page 2, line 1, after no insert incumbent provider, or page 2 of the report, line 3, strike has not yet been substituted.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L019. L019, members, has to do with a number of those things we discussed in committee, some of those concerns by the Colorado Rural Electric Association with regard to the contiguous areas, those type of things. So it's basically a cleanup of some of the things that was discussed that we did not address in the amendments in the committee. Ask for your aye vote.
Any further discussion on L019? Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, just trying to catch up on this slightly over a page amendment. Just if the sponsors could give a little bit more information perhaps on where we talk about speeds at 10 down and 1 up. Is that under the unserved definition or is that under broadband network?
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. This clarifies those in committee. We inadvertently struck out the portion that said the build-out would be the goal of the FEC or the 25 and 3, which is greater. The 10 and 1, the 10 download, 1 up, is still the definition, and we're trying to clarify. What we did is clarify that the definition of unserved is that of 10 and 1, but we still build out to 25 and 3.
Any further discussion on L019? Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask for an aye vote on this. If it does indeed fit in those correct areas of the definition, although it also goes into how we're going to define the geographic area of an unserved. So I'd like to look further into that. But colleagues, what's important here on how we define unserved versus broadband network, I know we're going to be throwing a lot of lingo around, but what's important in unserved is that's how we determine who is eligible for funds. How we define broadband network is important because that's what we'll be building in those unserved areas. So this is a good clarification. As the bill came to us, it actually had the perverse impact of defining the broadband networks that we would be building as too slow and then not having unserved as clearly being those areas with slow or no internet. So this is a good amendment. It puts us in the right direction, and this bill did not come out of committee in the right place. So I ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Any further discussion on L019? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of L019. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. L019 is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L018.
Amendment L018, Senate Bill 2 by Senators Quorum and Sonnenberg, amend the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report dated January 31st, 2018.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L018. Members, this is the clarification that came from the PUC to help some ambiguities that were created out of the bill as well. This is what the PUC had come with us to about a clarification, and so I would ask for your support on this bill, or on this amendment.
Any further discussion on L018? Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, it's a 4-page amendment. I would ask for perhaps even that we could maybe have some more time to look at this. I know it's technical, but even technical issues in broadband can have unintended consequences. So, Mr. Chair, just seeing a 4-page amendment and trying to process that immediately on a broadband bill, I would I would ask for a senatorial 5, but a 5 isn't going to be time to do 4 pages.
Senator Sonnenberg, did you have something to say first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what I was going to say, the only thing that makes it a 4-page amendment is we included, it doesn't have a lot of changes to it. The duplicative language on page 2 is already in the bill, but is added and changed to here. It actually, the other things are simply a couple of things that were struck out to clarify, but I am happy to do a senatorial 5. If you look on pages 2, 3, and 4, after the additional language that's already in the bill that we just duplicated, we do a couple of strikes out of entire sections, which makes it a 4-page. But I'm happy to do a senatorial 5. Basically has to do with date changes, those type of things, talking about the competitive stuff, that type of thing.
Senator Donovan, would you still request a senatorial 5?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would certainly appreciate that consideration.
Okay, the committee will stand in recess for a senatorial 5.
Labor and Technology Committee report dated January 31st, 2018, page 2, line 7. After
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We began this discussion on this bill about talking about the importance of getting dollars into rural broadband, and that's been one of the major hurdles Colorado from corner to corner. If you take a look at the bill, even in its various forms of amendments, we do not begin that funding process until 2019. So if you reflect on all the testimony that was given on behalf and in support of increasing the funding, and as I'm talking about this, I would love to move Amendment 23.
Better late than never.
Since
Go.
I've moved it, I can continue my boisterous defense of it. When we were talking about the funding of this in the first amendment that we passed, there was much discussion on how critical it is to get these monies out to rural Colorado. But colleagues, note, we do not do that until 2019. So this amendment, you will see, takes just a straight $10 million. It's not a percentage allocation. It's just $10 million from the high cost support mechanism and puts it into the broadband deployment board in 2018. Why am I doing 10 million and not a percentage? Because colleagues, last year you supported a $9.4 million amendment to the budget. So we did this last year. Those are the dollars right now that are building broadband in rural Colorado. So if we could do 9.4 out of the budget last year, we should be able to do $10 million this year without impacting any of the companies that receive support for this. The other important part of this is if we give out $10 million, we do not step backwards. If we pass the bill as it currently written, we actually step backwards for almost 2 years in working on rural broadband because there will be no money to deploy. So, colleagues, I really ask you if you supported the concept of doing percentage disbursements and really sending a message that we're committed to this project, then you should support L023 because we won't lose any ground. We'll keep some money in the fund. We'll be able to keep the momentum on those projects. We'll be able to keep communities in rural Colorado working on grant applications without having to take almost 2 years off because of the timing of the fiscal year and because of the timing of the grant being dispersed. So I ask for your support on L023.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to support this. It only changes at 4 months. It gives us $10 million in 4 months. But I have not understand that this process has now taken, this negotiations to come up with this bill has taken 8 months plus. And I'm leery of watching the coalition fall apart if that's what would happen. So I am going to ask for a no vote on this amendment for the 4-month additional funding.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The date, you could interpret the date as being 4 months, but that's a deadline date. So this money should be transferred in. And again, if we don't do this, we step backwards. If we don't pass this amendment, we cannot straight face to our communities that we are deploying rural broadband starting now. Because we won't, because there will be no money. So I ask you, we can afford to do 10 million. It will not impact any of the telecom stakeholders that have been involved in this process because, again, we did 9.4 last year through the budget process, and that was successful. That's the only money that we've had in the Broadband Deployment Fund to give out. So this 10 million is an important part of the promise that we made to rural Colorado to fund rural broadband. And this amendment has been seen by the folks and stakeholder group that have been working on this bill, and I did not hear any concerns about that amendment.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually am asking for a no vote on this. I appreciate the great senator from Vail or wherever, Aspen, but I think that should be separate legislation. I do not believe that should be part of this particular bill, but I do concur that there is merit to the amendment, but I do believe it should be separate. Thank you. I urge a no vote.
Senator Donovan, correction, Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in favor of this amendment, and I appreciate my colleague from Vail bringing it. This amendment, when we go back and we talk about did we do all we can to support rural broadband in Colorado, this amendment will allow us to say yes, we did all we could. We made sure those funds were available, and they were available at the earliest opportunity to build out internet access, high-speed internet access to rural Colorado. So I appreciate this amendment, and I strongly support it.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me clarify one thing. If you remember last year, the money, the $9.5 million, came from reserves, not the high cost fund. That's kind of apples and oranges here a little bit. I would ask for your no vote on this. Quite frankly, I'm not sure we can be ready to run by September 1, 2018. So that's only my math skills later this year. I ask for a no vote.
Any further discussion on L023? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of L023. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Noes have it, and L023 is lost. There is an amendment on the desk. Ms. Carpenter, please read L032.
Amendment L032 to Senate Bill 2 by Senator Tate. Amendment printed bill page 4, line 27, strike 2016, substitute 2017, page 5 of the bill, line 2, strike 2016.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L032 to Senate Bill 2.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we've talked a little bit already this morning about how funds are allocated out of the high-cost support mechanism to fund broadband and how that's scaled down over the 5-year period. However, rural telecommunications providers that receive support from the fund will continue to receive a same flat level of support through that same period. However, in the bill, there's a date reference for the determination of the baseline of that support, and this amendment merely changes the date to a more appropriate date and a more recent date for determining that level amount of funding from January 1st, 2016 to January 1st, 2017. Ask for support on the amendment. Thank you.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the good senator from Centennial bringing this forward. There has been a question whether or not this affects a current case. I don't know the answer to that, so I'm willing to support this until we clarify that if it is indeed. I don't think it changes the money distribution any, saving that year, so I'm going to ask for your yes vote. This is a friendly amendment on L032.
Any further discussion on L032? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of L032. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. L032 is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read L027.
Amendment L027, Senate Bill 2 by Senator Donovan, amend the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report dated January 31st, 2018, page 7, line 11, strike, supported or...
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, this is a small but I think important amendment when we talk about the unintended consequences of our legislation in this building. What it takes out is we take the word supported or approved and we substitute in funding. Let me give you context of this amendment. In past years, there have been different branches of the state that have been given out money for broadband projects. At times, this has resulted in the same dollars being spent on the same projects, which certainly we do not want to happen. Limited dollars, we want to spread them as much as we can. The bill as written says that if a project is supported or approved by the Department of Local Affairs, DOLA, then it is excluded from getting a broadband grant. Support and approved could be interpreted as them helping them write the grant process, them flagging the opportunity for a community to apply for this money. I would like to see this change to funded, so it's very clear that our intent is to not spend the same money on the same project. We want to empower DOLA to continue to support our local communities and for those regional DOLA representatives to be able to aid small communities in writing the grant process or working through the process. But that could be interpreted as supported, and that could disqualify someone from then going after dollars. So I ask for your support on L027 to change supported or approved to funded, just so that we are crystal clear on communities and how they can apply for broadband funding. Thank you.
Any further, Senator Sonnenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would urge a no vote on L027. If you look at this, what this allows, and understand the amendments we've already passed have said that we cannot overbuild. I think what this does is changes it, and if it says funded, if you got money and you didn't spend it on that project, that still makes you eligible. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have people that have received money on a project, not spent it there, able to duplicate and get more money on that project. I would ask for a no vote.
Senator Donovan.
Mr. Chair, I think I better move the amendment if we're going to vote on it.
Say that again? Oh, okay. All right, so any further discussion after L027 was moved? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of L027. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Noes have it, and L027 is lost. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L026.
Amendment L026, Senate Bill 2 by Senator Donovan, amend the Business Labor Technology Committee report dated January 31st, 2018, page 3, line.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L026.
Got it.
L026 is in reference to when we begin to transfer money out of the high-cost support mechanism to the broadband fund. When we start to move those dollars, we are taking the money from a fund that supported telephone service in high-cost areas, and we're moving it to support broadband infrastructure build-out. The bill as written suggests that as we move that money, the burden of providing telephone service to high-cost areas should be reduced as well. Right? You take away the funding, you need to reduce the obligation. What the bill is silent on is that they must reduce the obligation in a way that is considerate of maintaining support for those areas that still might need high-cost telephone support. So this amendment adds language that requests that as they're making these considerations of removing obligation from the companies that are required to provide high-cost telephone support, that they do it in a manner that perhaps looks at areas that have competition and therefore have more guaranteed telephone service. So colleagues, this is quite technical. I'm bouncing between the two different funds. I'm talking about the obligations of one fund and how that's impacted by when we move dollars over to the other fund. But I think that this amendment is important because it requests that we keep in mind that there are areas of the state that as we remove obligations, they should do that in a thoughtful manner that protects those areas that have less telephone competition than others. So I ask for an aye vote on L026.
Any further discussion on L026? Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, we don't need this. We have the board that can deal with this effectively. I ask for a no vote on L026.
Any further discussion on L026? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of L026. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Noes have it, and L026 is lost. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read L035.
Amendment L035, Senate Bill 2 by Senator Guzman, amend printed bill, page 4, line 19, strike 20, and substitute 60, page 4, line 20, strike 40, and substitute 70, page 4, line 21, strike 60, and substitute 80, page 4, line 22, strike 80, and substitute 90.
Minority Leader Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L035.
Do the amendment.
Thank you very much. This is the amendment that was passed earlier today, but was in conflict with one of the other amendments that was passed, and so I need to renew this amendment and ask for your support.
Any further? Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I view this as a friendly amendment. Ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion on L035? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of L035. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and L035 is adopted. To the bill. To the bill, Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the great discussion and debate. I think we can all agree that it's important that we get internet and broadband to rural areas of the state. How we deliver that seems to be what the contention is. I think we have, in principle, a good compromise in delivering that process. Here's the great thing about this. The high-cost mechanism that we are using to do this over the next 5 years goes away in 2024. This sunsets in 2024. Let's do what we can now. Let this sunset and move forward. Ask for your aye vote for Senate Bill 2.
Senator Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I ask for an aye vote. Members, this has been something that I've been working on for about a year. I started last January working on this, and frankly, we did not have the bill ready to run last year. Worked closely with stakeholders throughout the summer, the fall, and I am so grateful. One of my big allies early on this was Senator Guzman, and we talked the importance of getting broadband to rural Colorado. And why is that so important? Because frankly, members, in many parts of the state, the people who reside in rural Colorado have been spectators in this booming economy. And I think with this bill, it is a giant step forward to making them participants. Their communities can grow, they can prosper, and their children will actually be able to stay in the community that they were raised in because employment will be there. Thank you very much. I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have one correction. Senator Quorum said he has been working on this since January. I can tell you Senator Quorum and a number of people in this chamber that have been working on this for years. I applaud your efforts. Thank you for your help as well as Senator Quorum's. This is not just this last year. You guys have been working on this for years. I'm thrilled that you've allowed me to be a part of this. Ask for a yes vote.
Any further discussion on Senator Donovan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, this does mark an important milestone in what has been trying to fix an issue with a commitment that we made that never was quite fulfilled. And so with the passage of this bill, and as it moves through the building and you know, with best hopes and intentions becomes the law of the land, we will change the future of communities in Senate District 5 and across the state. Because when I go into my communities and you hold a town hall or you drink coffee or you meet someone at a brewery and you talk about the future of their community and their families and their kids and their access to health care and if they can get a hunting license or not and how do they file their taxes, everything they do in their daily lives revolves around having access to the internet. And this is something that most of us in this room just assume will be there. We don't even have to think through the issue of how am I going to accomplish this task because I don't have access to internet. None of us have to walk through with our children, how are we going to get you to apply for college because we do not have internet? None of us in this building have to think, how am I going to file my taxes because I can't do an online filing? Even a more lighthearted one, none of us have to figure out how to apply for a hunting license anymore because we don't have access to internet. Right now, the people in my district have to drive multiple hours to the closest Colorado Department of Wildlife office, fill out a paper form, and then have that officer go online for them to get a hunting license. This impacts every aspect of our lives. Doctors can't conform with the requirements of the Affordable Care Act because they don't have enough bandwidth to share their files with their patients or insurance companies. Our teachers in schools can't even stick to the laws that we have passed because their school might have dial-up. So with this commitment today of getting dollars out into rural Colorado, we are truly going to change what the future of these communities looks like. No longer do they have to say, if only we had internet then. If only we had internet, then we could open a co-working space and attract new people. If only we had internet, then we could have a tech class to get young girls interested in STEM. If only we had internet, then we could apply for a grant to attract a brand new business to our community and revitalize Main Street. If only we had internet, then maybe we could have a dentist in our town. So thank you, colleagues. I appreciate your support of this, and I ask for your support. And it'll be a long time coming, a promise fulfilled to rural Colorado. Thank you.
Senator Corum.
Thank you. I would just like to validate the importance of this into rural Colorado. I just received a text from my wife that said she'd had several phone calls from people who actually wanted to listen in this morning to the debate, but they had no internet.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 2? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 2. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and Senate Bill 2 is adopted. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 9.
Senate Bill 9 by Senators Finberg and Priola, concerning the right of consumers of electricity to interconnect electricity storage systems for use on their property.
Senator Finberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 9 and the committee report from the Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the committee, we cleaned up the bill a little bit. We slightly updated a definition. We shortened the legislative declaration and added a few kind of protections and clarifications based on requests and conversations with stakeholders as well as members of the committee.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, I move L013 to the committee report. This has been more collaboration on seconds to get the bill in a form that all parties are happy with. Ask for an aye vote.
I think we need to adopt the committee report first. Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of the Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy Committee report. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read L013.
Amendment L013.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L013 and ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussion on L013? Seeing none, the motion for the Senator Sonnenberg. Any further discussion on L013? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of L013. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. L013 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Finberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this is, I think, an important bill that has gone through an important process of collaboration and discussions over the last year or so, and proud to have the support of many of the manufacturers of these energy storage systems, the installers, the utilities, and I think this really has been a pretty collaborative process to get us to where we are, and I think this will be a big step forward, and I'm sure all of my colleagues here agree with that, and I urge an aye vote on Senate Bill 9.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the sponsors of this bill working to address at least some of my issues that I had. I still have a couple of concerns, and I'm just going to briefly explain those concerns. When we set up a system like this, many of us ratepayers, part of our a cost of our what we pay deals with the infrastructure, transmission lines, utilized to deliver the entire electricity throughout the entire grid. What this doesn't cover, and when we have net metering and those type of things, when we put electricity back out on the grid from these private individuals, they put it out at retail costs. And those retail costs allow them to utilize the infrastructure and get credit. Am I saying that's a bad thing? It's minimal, it's probably not a big deal. I just think we need to be careful on how we go down that road on who pays that infrastructure cost and who doesn't.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Sonnenberg. That was addressed working with Black Hills on L013 to try to keep in mind when there is net metering that there will be a different area that the PUC will have to look at and different rules. So, thank you.
Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate and clarify. I think these are valid concerns. However, the only thing I would add is these fundamentally are, this discussion around this new concern that was just raised is really a discussion around net metering. And that's a discussion we've had. That's a discussion we'll continue to have, I'm sure, here as well as at the Public Utilities Commission. My opinion is that this bill really is just simply about the battery that someone would be adding to an already net metered system and really shouldn't exacerbate, impact, or do anything negative for these customers or for other ratepayers. So I hear what the senator is saying. I think this gets us in a direction where people can start feeling like they can adopt this technology, and I think things will change down the road, and we'll make adjustments, or maybe that'll just be at the rulemaking process at the regulatory level. But I think this is an important step forward for us to embrace new technologies and make sure consumers and ratepayers have control over their own energy decisions in their household.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 9? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 9. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 9 is adopted. Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee rise and report.
Motion for the body is for the committee to rise and report. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The committee will rise and report.
Senate will come back to order. Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. I ask the clerk to read the report.
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave reports out on consideration the following attached bills being the second reading thereof makes the following recommendations are on Senate Bill 2 as amended, Senate Bill 9 as amended, passed the second read order and gross and placed on the counter for third reading final passage.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read Amendment 1 to the Committee of the Whole on Senate Bill 2?
Amendment 001, Committee of the Whole, Senate Bill 2. Senator Donovan moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to show the following. Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment would reflect that L026 did indeed pass. I want to give this body another chance to consider this. We were talking about many technical things, lots of different issues, funding, wording, process, etc. So, colleagues, I would urge thoughtful consideration on this amendment. It is important that as we remove funding for the provider of last resort, and the bill directs obligations of that provider of last resort to be reduced in step with the funding, that is done in a manner that protects those folks that may have access to only one telephone provider to be put to the bottom of the list, right? We want to focus on areas that have multiple telephone providers and remove that obligation first as we start to move through this process of moving funds and moving obligation. So, colleagues, again, this is one of these technical aspects of the bill, but it is important that with this added language, we ensure that we protect those folks that may only have one telephone provider, that the obligation to provide that telephone service is removed at the bottom of the list, and we remove those that have more of a guarantee of telephone service first. So I ask for your support on COW number 1, which, Mr. President, did I ever move? Okay, thank you.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Urge a no vote again on Committee of the Whole Amendment 1. We have two funds. We have a high-cost fund. We have a broadband fund. We move money from the high-cost fund to the broadband fund. There is money still left in the high-cost fund. Matter of fact, those small rural providers are already protected in this. They don't go with the phase down. We don't need this. Ask for a no vote.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know this is more dialogue than we're accustomed to on cows, but this amendment does not address the small rural telecoms. They're right, they're carved out. This is the largest provider. There is one provider in the state that is required in today's current language to provide telephone service. As we remove money from them, support that they have gotten in the past, and move that money over to do broadband, the bill states that we must also remove their obligation to provide telephone service. This amendment just suggests that we need to be wise and thoughtful about which areas we remove from their obligation first. Thank you.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, charge me 10. I'm okay with it. I don't think this is necessary. I think in doing the research, we found out that I mentioned the 2.6% that is collected in the high-cost fund from your cell phone and your landline. The big payer in this right now is the cell phone. Landlines are going away. I mean, it's a fact that out there that there's a lot of people that I know no longer have a landline of any kind. So they are relying on their cellular service, and so that wouldn't be affected. So I think this bill is unnecessary. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment 1 to the Committee of the Whole report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 2. Are there any no votes? Senator Quorum, Senator Sonnenberg, Majority Leader Holbert, Senator Smallwood, Senator Tate, Senator Lambert, Senator Priola, Senator Lundberg, Senator Martinez-Humenick. I got you, Senator Sonnenberg. Senator Neville, Senator Marble, Senator Scott, Senator Cook, Senator Hill, Senator Crowder, Senator Baumgardner, Senator John. Please add the President. With 16 ayes, 18 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 is lost. Question before the body is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes on the report to the Committee of the Whole? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused. 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused. Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 2 is amended. Senate Bill 9 is amended, passed on second reading in order to engross and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Consideration of memorials. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title of the Senate Joint Memorial 3?
Senate Joint Memorial 3 by Senator Garcia and Representatives Covarrubias and Escar concerning memorializing Congress to approve and fund a new Veterans Administration hospital in southern Colorado.
Senator Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Joint Memorial 3 and ask to be read at length.
Mr. Carpenter.
Senate Joint Memorial 3 by Senator Garcia and Representatives Covarrubias and Escar concerning memorializing Congress to approve and fund a new Veterans Administration hospital in southern Colorado. Whereas the Veterans Administration, VA, healthcare system is an invaluable resource for the millions of men and women who have served their country in the United States Armed Forces and for their families. And whereas Southern Colorado has the fastest growing population of veterans in the nation, with more than 86,000 men and women in the immediate vicinity eligible for VA care. And whereas the current VA satellite facilities in the area only have the capacity to serve fewer than half of the eligible veterans who may need care. And whereas, since the closure of the VA facility in Bent, Colorado in 2001, veterans in southern Colorado and elsewhere in the region have been forced to travel to Denver or the Fitzsimmons VA Hospital in Aurora for specialty care. And whereas, when a patient eligible for VA care must travel more than 50 miles for treatment, taxpayers, in addition to the individual veterans, are responsible for travel and lodging expenses for that patient. Further, many elderly or otherwise infirm veterans have great difficulty making often frequent trips to the Denver metropolitan area to receive their health care services. And whereas many veterans eligible for VA care are mid to low income residents of the state and may be surviving check to check off of retirement, pensions, or Social Security payments. And whereas construction of a new VA hospital in an area north of Pueblo would serve the veterans of Pueblo, the home of heroes and birthplace of 4 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients, in addition to residents of Colorado Springs and El Paso County within its 50-mile service radius. Those men and women living as far as Castle Rock and Trinidad would be eligible to receive VA health care services without requiring taxpayer assistance for travel and lodging. And whereas, in such a location, a new VA hospital would be positioned to serve not only Colorado veterans, but also veterans in western Kansas and Oklahoma and northern New Mexico, for whom travel to Pueblo would be closer or more convenient than travel to Albuquerque or another regional facility. And whereas a new VA hospital facility north of Pueblo would be a major economic driver and boost to rural health care in the state by drawing hundreds of doctors in residency, nurses, and other healthcare professionals to underserved areas of Colorado. And whereas these new healthcare professionals could partner with local hospitals, healthcare facilities, Pueblo Community College, and Colorado State University, Pueblo, to increase access to valuable medical and mental health care and specialty services for the general population of the region, in addition to those veterans being served by the VA. And whereas the Veterans Health Administration Office of Rural Health works to implement targeted solution-driven approaches that increase access to health care for the more than 3 million veterans nationally who live in rural communities through innovation, collaboration, and partnership with VA program offices and federal, state, and local healthcare entities. And whereas, in such respects, a new VA hospital in southern Colorado, north of Pueblo, would contribute significantly to improvements in the quality of life and health in the state and region. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, call on the congressional leadership of our state and nation to actively and aggressively pursue funding for the construction of a new Veterans Administration hospital to be located in southern Colorado, near Interstate 25, north of Pueblo. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint memorial be sent to Colorado's congressional delegation, the president of AFGE Local 2430, the director of the VA Eastern Colorado Healthcare System, and the United Veterans Committee of Colorado.
Senator Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, thank you for your support. I hope, if you look at the co-sponsorship on this memorial, to continue to move forward. I think it's a robust conversation that we're willing to engage in Southern Colorado, recognizing the needs of our veterans. I served in the United States Marine Corps as a Mortuary First Specialist in 2003, and can tell you that in Southern Colorado, we recognize the need for additional services on behalf of our veterans. You know, I reminded several people that often we say it's important to recognize the tasks and the commitment that veterans make and how much we support them. But this resolution really sends a message that is important that this body recognizes that support and looks forward to exploring the opportunity that Southern Colorado awaits.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I want to ask for your support for this memorial as well. I appreciate the senator from Pueblo bringing it up. And there's a theme in our country right now. There's a theme in our state. It's the challenges as we see demographics, more and more folks moving to urban areas, more concentrated populations. What does government look like in bridging the needs of urban areas versus rural areas? And I think this discussion of a VA brings up a huge opportunity. We know there's need for reform. We ran a joint memorial together last year for reform of the VA, to rethink how we're providing services to our veterans, to cut down the wait lines, to provide better access to those who need it. No one has a greater problem with access right now in Colorado than those that would be affected by this VA. Those in the South, those in the East, especially in Colorado. And when you think VA and we think our request, I think even beyond that, our request to Congress and to the VA administration is, don't just think about how we've done things in the past. Don't just do one more of the same messed up model. How do we innovate? How do we provide a new model of service? How do we provide better access that fits, especially in this largely rural area, very spread out? How do we provide the innovation and the opportunity to make good on our promises? For better or for worse, we made strong promises to those who risked their life, who risked their limbs, many of them missing limbs these days, my father-in-law included. We see this, we see a visible representation of their service, and it's important for us to make sure we give them the best care possible. I think this is a great opportunity for us to come together, left and right, Republican, Democrat, rural, urban, and say, let's do this, let's serve Colorado's needs, and let's do so in an innovative way that abandons some of the failed policies in the past, but really provides the access and the care and the opportunity to make good on our promise to those who have given so much to us. So I genuinely ask for your support, colleagues, for this important step forward in access for our veterans.
Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to explain my no vote on this today. I strongly support the sponsors' objectives in doing this, and I strongly support the senator from Colorado Springs and his comments about the necessary reforms that we need to have in the Veterans Administration. And this year, I think for the first time in an awfully long time, some of the leadership within the Veterans Administration is actually being held accountable for their incompetent acts in their leadership within the Veterans Administration. The fact that we have had hundreds of thousands of veterans who have died waiting even to be enrolled to get their veterans benefits is an absolute disgrace nationally for this country. That's not this memorial. We have had cost overruns on veterans facilities. that are basically robbing from the services that should be provided and are going into cost overruns and delays and things like that. Again, that's not this memorial. We've had a new veterans clinic in Colorado Springs, which is experiencing some of the same problems here. If you'll see on page 2, it says people elsewhere in the region, veterans have been forced to travel to Denver, the Fitzsimmons VA Hospital, for specialty care. And that includes the clinic in Colorado Springs because it's not providing comprehensive care. It's expected that veterans are going to have to go to a major hospital to have access to that specialty care. But that's not this memorial. My concern here is we are still following, our conclusion in this whole thing is we need a new veterans hospital in southern Colorado, which would solve some of the problems. Unfortunately, it doesn't solve all the problems. And I agree with Senator from Colorado Springs, who's saying we need fundamental reform in the Veterans Administration. I agree with that. And my vote is largely symbolic because I really, really support the objectives of what this is trying to do. We need to fix our veterans care system. And Congress is trying to come up with some new innovative ideas for doing that. But that's not this memorial. If this had sort of repeated the memorial from last year and said, let's fix the darn system, then I'm all in favor of it. But I don't think it's wise to telegraph the idea that in order to fix this, we have to have a same kind of veterans hospital, the same kind of business model that has been failing for probably 50 years. We need to fix the Veterans Administration from the inside. So I thank you, Mr. President, for the time. Again, I strongly support our veterans in this. I'm not so sure right now I can come to the same conclusion that the way we do that is to start a new hospital. It's not a matter, and I love having something right between the cities of Pueblo and Colorado Springs. That'd be a wonderful idea, but I'm very concerned that we need to have better access even through private care facilities, even allowing people in Trinidad, in Durango, in Grand Junction, in Burlington, to be able, if they're veterans, why cannot they get specialty care or local care from their local physicians in some of those areas if it's available, rather than forcing veterans going to specialty hospitals? And then it also includes, in some cases, having to go to Cheyenne, Wyoming for certain kinds of care. The distribution, the access to care in the VA has just not, they have not been listening to the concerns of the veterans in all cases. And I think we need to have that kind of discussion as well, because there are positive things we can do. But I thank the sponsor for bringing this forward, and I just want to explain my no vote. Thank you.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to echo a little bit on what the good senator from Colorado Springs was talking about, although I'm going to support the memorial because his heart's in the right place. When it comes to reform, it makes more sense to me to hand out credit cards to each and every one of our veterans so they can get the health care any cotton-picking place they want. They can go to their local hospital. They can go to any hospital in Denver, Pueblo, Durango, and we should pay for that. To me, that makes more sense than trying to fix a much broken system with overruns that they can't control. I want to hand my friends a credit card and say, we'll take care of you. Thank you for protecting us. We're going to give you a credit card. You get health care wherever you need. I prefer that avenue, but I'll still support the memorial because his heart's in the right place. Ask for you to consider those things in the future as well as we move forward on how do we actually reform this system and take care of those that have made it so easy for us to do what we do here.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I appreciate the last two speakers on this. I do support what the sponsor is trying to do. We take a look at what we're trying to do with a system that has failed in delivery of VA services to our veterans. And then we talk about supporting another hospital. I support the idea of making sure that we deliver those services, but I do, to the senator from Sterling, I do agree with him completely that this is a failed system that is in need of a major overhaul. I do take one, even though I will be supporting this, this memorial, I do take one issue. When we start talking about economic drivers to areas, and we start talking about truly what this should be about, is delivering services to our veterans, I would just encourage us in the future that we separate those two issues to make sure that we focus on what is truly important. I have a little frustration with that, and I apologize if that upsets anyone, but I think those are two separate issues and they should not be blended together. This is not about making sure that we're creating economic development opportunities for areas. This is about taking care of our veterans. So although I will be in support of the memorial from the good senator from Pueblo, I do take exception with some of the issues brought up within and encourage that we take a look at a system in the future that does not fail our veterans, that truly becomes innovative. The VA system currently, as it's formulated, is not that system.
Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of Senate Joint Memorial 003, and I appreciate the comments that have been made about the critical need for reform of the VA, and I agree with those comments. My purpose in coming before you is just to say, for the record, should the Congress approve and fund a new Veterans Administration hospital in southern Colorado, and should some type of construction take place down the road, that construction and the completion of that project be done on time and under budget, because we don't have a very good track record in the state of Colorado. I think that the final point I wish to make is that when we are talking about the need for an inpatient facility in southern Colorado, it does not necessarily have to be a massive hospital. There are very innovative and creative designs for hospitals that can meet the needs of an area, of a region, and I think that that kind of creativity and innovation needs to occur should something like this materialize in the future. Thank you.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support today of Senate Joint Memorial 003 just because it's impactful to my district. Certainly, this hospital would be located in Pueblo, which is one of the central gathering places of southern Colorado, and where, as the memorial points to, we're seeing one of the fastest growing populations of veterans. But if you are a veteran who served our country and have an expectation of having access to health care throughout your life, and you've chosen Salida as your hometown, drive to Grand Junction is 3.5 hours. A drive to Denver pushes on 3. It's about 2 hours, 45 minutes. But Pueblo would cut down that drive to under 2 hours. This would be a more accessible hospital to the citizens of Salida and Chaffee County, and very likely Gunnison as well, depending on if it's snow or if it's winter or summer and what passes are open. So I rise in strong support of this. It would be great to have another hospital accessible to the south central and southeastern part of the state. It would certainly make access to health care more accessible for our veterans that live in those areas. So thank you to the sponsor for bringing this.
Senator Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I appreciate your thoughtfulness in consideration of this memorial, and would say that nothing precludes this body from being receptive to the suggestions that were raised. And I agree with the senator from El Paso County who recognizes that I think we should call on our VA system to be more innovative and more responsive to our veterans. I think we are united in the call that we recognize that more should be done for our veterans in the commitment that we make to them to serve on behalf of this nation to ensure that they have the support that they have. So with that, Mr. President, I renew my motion for Senate Bill, for Joint Memorial 3.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you for the, I didn't mean to interrupt. You know, I think we have made some, you know, since I've been elected, this is the third secretary of the VA that indicated that they would fix the problems, and we haven't fixed them, but we have made headway. You know, a lot of what we're talking about, there's a lot of issues in what we're talking about. You know, TRICARE is available to civilian hospitals, but right now the veteran also, through Connect, is also through a contractor through the VA. Matter of fact, the biggest problem we have with this whole situation, there's a lot of legislators who are veterans, but there's very few of us who are in the system and do not quite understand. And that's the biggest problem of it. You know, the hospital and the clinics are two different areas. Now, what I do advocate, you know, what we have in this country, if you look at our healthcare system, the turmoil that we're going through there, as far as the clinics, the VA, I advocate those clinics be shut down. And I advocate that the civilian population or the civilian doctors take care of that. And I don't think there'd be a job loss, because I think the people that work in these clinics could actually transfer right into the healthcare system. But your hospitals are a different issue. But I think what we need to look at, specifically in Pueblo, we have 2 hospitals right now, and I think what I would like to see, and I did put on as a co-sponsor this particular bill, but what I'd like to see is a combination VA and civilian hospital. What we have is 2 hospitals that are somewhat aged. I think a single complex, if feasible, would be more of the way that we look at in the future. So I think one of the bigger problems I have is 70% of the doctors are trained in the VA system. And I will say that, you know, that might be admirable, but the reality is I'd like to see these doctors practice on the civilian population if they want to get their credentials and whatnot, and send the VA the very qualified doctors. So there's a lot of issues, but we are making some headway. But you know, and it's a slow process. But the reality is the VA is so big and cumbersome. But I don't think that the override and the cost are the issue on what we're talking about here. This is a wish list for a hospital of the future. And for that, I do support this and move this bill forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. President. With all due respect to the senator from Alamosa, I think we could ask for both. I think veterans deserve that. I think I would not advocate for the closure of any clinics that serve our veterans. I think members make a great point in saying that maybe there should be other options. The great senator from Sterling relying on saying maybe that we should be looking to support our veterans in any of those options. I think the Choice Program does that, and I think veterans should have that kind of flexibility. But the reality is the services just aren't provided, and especially in rural Colorado, where there's a lack of providers many times. A hospital can serve as an anchor for those services. And so I renew my motion for Senate Joint Memorial 03 and ask for your aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Memorial 3. Are there any no votes? Senator Lambert. With 33 ayes, 1 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Joint Memorial 3 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Merrifield, Senator Todd, Senator Williams, Senator Court. Leader Guzman, Senator Donovan, Mr. Carpenter, delivery to the governor.
To the governor for signature on Tuesday, February 7, 2018 at 10 a.m. Senate General Resolution 3.
Announcements. Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. Building Jobs for Colorado cordially invites you to a reception tonight with key policymakers in Colorado design, construction, and building owners and industry leaders. It's tonight at the U Club from 4:30 to 6:30, and everybody's welcome, and they would appreciate your attendance.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, today is the Mile High United Way's Day at the Capitol, or Day on the Hill, as they call it. And they distributed coffee mugs on our desks, I believe yesterday afternoon. There's a painting on the mug that was done by a metro area youth who aged out of foster care and is served by their Bridging and Gap program. I think we're all familiar with United Way. Please, they were here early this morning, and I think they're here at the Capitol all day. If you see someone from Mile High United Way, please welcome them. In addition, tomorrow at lunch, February 8th, from noon to 1:30, the Economic Development Council of Colorado is having their annual legislative luncheon. Come meet economic-minded folks from across the state working to strengthen Colorado's economy and enhance economic opportunities for all Coloradans through a vision and strategy to pursue growth and development opportunities. The lunch will be at First Baptist Church across the street, again tomorrow at noon. Finally, members on the Business Committee, our committee is scheduled to start at 1:30 today. I have 3 bills up and 3 very, 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 very quick bills up at another committee right at 1:30. So if you're inclined to be tardy to committee, today would be a good day for that. We'll be starting just past 1:30. Thank you.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy Committee, we were to have a joint meeting today upon adjournment. The House is working on their supplementals, so we're going to do it without them. We don't need them anyhow. So we will start at 11:05 in 271. Thank you.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Health will be meeting at 11:05, 354.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I would like to encourage you to join me tomorrow, February the 8th, from 7:30 to 8:30 for an annual Colorado School Nutrition Association legislative breakfast and coffee. The meeting will be held here at the Capitol at the old Supreme Court chambers. Come and meet with many of the school nutritionists who are responsible for feeding our kids across our great state. Thank you.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to extend an invitation on behalf of the Colorado Realtors to their reception this evening from 4:30 to 6 at the Brown Palace. And then also tomorrow, their luncheon at noon at the Brown Palace. So again, our Colorado Realtors. And the conversation tomorrow will be about marijuana and real estate. So encourage you all to attend. Thank you.
Majority Leader Holbert. Where is he? Oh, Senator Smallwood trying to hide over there in the other corner. Please, Senator Williams, will you drag him down the center aisle here, please? Will the Senate choir please assemble? Hopefully some of the Senate choir is still here. You may have to do a solo, Senator Lundberg. Oh, there we go. Notice Senator Merrifield. Fire away. Happy birthday.
To you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Senator Smallwood. Happy birthday to you.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we will not have bills to read over later today. We're going to adjourn. Mr. President, I move the Senate adjourn until 9 a.m. Thursday, February 8th.
Motion is for the Senate to adjourn until 9 a.m. Thursday, February 8th. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and we will be adjourned.